Most of the men struggling with women nowadays are what I like to call safety guys. They're well-intentioned men. They have good intentions. They have good hearts. They just want connection. They want to grow with someone, to share life with someone and have kids, the white picket fence, all of the above. But a lot of these guys are struggling immensely with the opposite sex. I know because I work with hundreds of guys all across the globe, and most of the guys who come to me for coaching fall neatly within this category. And what they fail to realize is no matter what their intention is, no matter what their orientation is to the relationship, no matter what goal they may have, ultimately, when it comes to attraction, when it comes to maintaining a relationship, the intention doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is impact. And when you are a safety guy, the impact that you are creating is a progressive lack of attraction. That's why in this video, I'm going to show you exactly why being a safety guy is such a problematic way to interface within a relationship. And more importantly than that, what you can do about it, what you can start to change about yourself, or more rather, reveal about yourself, unearth within yourself that's going to stop you from experiencing the impact that you've probably experienced for most of your life. So before we can get into it, we have to first understand, what do I mean by a safety guy? So I have this concept called the two sides of attraction, which are spark and safety. Spark is anything that creates or reveals attraction when you're dealing with the women. So some traits think about spark are going to be having a good sense of humor, looking good, smelling well, being bold, being smooth, being able to escalate, having boundaries. These are all traits that if you begin to embody them, they create spark. On the other side of the spectrum is safety. Now, some safety traits are going to be being emotionally intelligent, being emotionally attuned, being genuinely interested in the woman's world, being kind, being considerate, protecting, providing, right? All of the traits society tells you to have, which is why there's so many safety guys around. Now, the problem with this is the vast majority of men are developed in one of these categories and severely deficient in the other. You have a lot of spark guys who can generate a lot of attraction, but they can't hold the connection. You have a lot of safety guys who struggle to generate attraction. And even if they do get a woman, they oftentimes are either settled for or suffer from dead bedrooms. So being only developed in one of these categories creates different problems. But you don't see a lot of men nowadays complaining about not being able to get laid. You don't see a lot of men complaining about getting a lot of matches on dating apps or being able to secure a lot of numbers via cold approach. What you see is a lot of men who either cannot generate attraction in and of itself or are within a relationship that is absolutely crumbling. And the problem that is being created in this situation is the fact that they are showing up as safety guys and they don't know how to get out of that identity. Now, there's a couple of reasons why being a safety guy is a problem. Okay, the first one is most of the clients who come to me who are safety guys are typically anxiously attached. I know that's a therapeutic term. A lot of us here, as men, we don't really like all of these therapeutic terms. Maybe you were with a woman who was like, gaslighting you and very manipulative, and she leaned upon some of these terms. But attachment styles are very real. They're very real. Don't delude yourself. Anxious attachment is a real thing, and a lot of safety guys have them. Now, why is anxious attachment such a bad thing for men? You can get away with being anxiously attached if you're a woman, but if you're a man, it is incredibly unattractive. Why? Because the traits that are in alignment with anxious attachment, culturally, we associate with feminine disposition. We associate the traits of anxious attachment to women. Why is that? Anxiously attached people tend to care a lot about their relationship, not in a normal way, like it's important to you, but they tend to pedestalize it and prioritize it more so than anything else in their life. They make the woman that they're with their world. They're willing to sacrifice any and everything to maintain the connection. They're unwilling to leave. Anxiously attached men have a unconscious fear of themselves being abandoned. So the way they orient themselves in the relationship is they are constantly trying to prevent that. They're constantly trying to do whatever they can to make their woman happy so that she will stay. This leads to them over functioning, right? Putting the relationship on their back and taking on all the responsibility of the relationship to ensure that the woman doesn't leave them. And this is unattractive because a lot of the times when you're anxiously attached, you have made the relationship your purpose. You've made making your woman happy your purpose. It is your reason for leaving. It is the reason for you to take your next breath. And women find that to be incredibly unattractive because The way that that feels on their end is neediness. It feels like you need them. Understand, women are wired to seek out strength. They're the weaker vessel. Historically, if they were with a man who was weak, it meant death. It meant they wouldn't survive. And even though we are not in that same type of environment where that's necessary, it is still a part of their DNA. So when you're coming across as a man in an anxiously attached way where you need all this reassurance, you need the woman to constantly tell you how she feels about you and that she loves you and cares for you, and for her to aggressively show how important you are to her, it feels needy to her. And there's two things you don't want a woman to feel. One, bored, and two, that you need them. Not that you don't care about them, not that they're not a priority in your life, but that you will crumble without them. And anxiously attached men tend to have that pattern. Now, the second trait that a lot of safety guys have is a lot of them tend to be codependent, right? Now, a lot of anxiously attached men are also codependent, but that's not always the case. Not all anxiously attached men are codependent, and not all codependent people are anxiously attached, but a lot of safety guys are. And when you're codependent, that essentially means that your woman's emotional state dictates yours. So the way that she feels dictates yours. You guys have probably experienced this, especially if you've been in relationships before. You probably have seen that your woman is in a bad mood, and her being in a bad mood puts you in a bad mood. It puts you in this state where you are reacting to her instead of being proactive and being grounded in your sense of self. So what tends to happen is the man will perceive the woman is in a bad mood. That puts him in a bad mood. So he tries to cheer her up. He tries to solve her problem, whatever that may be, not because he's trying to make her feel better or to make her smile, but more so, he's trying to make himself feel better through her. He is enmeshed. He is too entangled in the relationship. It's almost like he doesn't have a sense of self. He's not interdependent, where there's one independent person, another independent person in a relationship who also tend to come together. He's codependent. He is wrapped up too much into this experience. And again, this conveys neediness to the woman. And when you combine these elements, when you combine this tendency to overfunction, to make your woman your world and your reason for existing, to not have your own life going on and wanting to share every single experience with her, to constantly need her reassurance and validation, you create conditions where your biggest fear becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Most guys who are in this safety category, what ultimately happens with them is the woman leaves. She leaves. There's no reason to stay. Staying in the dynamic just creates negative feelings for her, so of course she leaves. We all know that women, generally speaking, are very feeling focused. These are not going, the way that you are approaching a relationship is not going to create good feelings for her. That neediness is not going to create good feelings for her. Knowing that you need so much reassurance and attention is going to drain the life from the connection. Having these covert contracts where you do a lot for your woman because you're secretly expecting her to do a lot for you and to repay you is going to drain the life from the connection. So in an attempt to make your woman happy and stay, you actually cause the complete opposite outcome. So when I coach guys and I talk to them about the two sides of attraction, spark and safety, a lot of them ask the obvious question. Okay, well, if being a safety guy is this bad, how can I start adding more spark to the connection? How can I start being a bit more integrated and flexible as to how I show up in the relationship so that I can both check both boxes and maintain the connection, but then also be a more whole, integrated man so that the rest of my life improves? Because that's the reason why I make this content. It is not for you to get women. I'm not one of those guys who feel like you should orient your entire existence around women. No, my philosophy is that when you make the necessary changes as a man, women become a positive byproduct. Understand, if you are able to both demonstrate spark and safety in a connection with your woman, it has a cascading effect to the rest of your life, because women are microcosms of life itself. That's why we call it Mother Nature. They are microcosms of life itself. As you become better with your dealings with women and you face your demons that are currently holding you back, when you cultivate the courage to implement some of the things I say in these videos, that courage becomes a character trait. It extends to other areas of life. The social skills that you cultivate are skills that you are able to leverage in other domains when it comes to networking, when it comes to making friends, when it comes to just adding more value to your life. So it is incredibly important for you to integrate the other side of attraction, which is spark. Now, the question is, how do you do that? There are many ways to do it. I listed out some of the spark traits at the beginning of this video. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's enough to get you started. But it's not as simple as you just knowing technically what to do, because there is a precondition that you must have in order to even unlock spark within yourself. There are things that you must do. There is a mindset that you must have in order to even open the door to more spark being created. And that mindset, that belief is, you do not need this woman. I'm gonna repeat that. You do not need this woman. You do not need a woman at all. You can desire one, very normal. You can want one, very normal, but you do not need one. When you internalize that, you free yourself, because the one thing that you must realize is that if you're going to create spark, what you need before you create spark is a willingness to leave. If you're a safety guy, the reason why you're not creating any spark is because you're not willing to leave. Your entire existence is oriented around making sure this woman stays with you because you perceive that you need her, and nothing can be further from the truth. So if you want to create more spark, you have to be willing to leave. That doesn't mean you have to leave at the first hiccup in the relationship or leave at the first moment you hit a speed bump in your connection. That's not what I'm saying. You can definitely be committed, but at the same time, you understand that if the woman does not show up in a way that you feel is helpful for the relationship, and you've communicated that to her and she's agreed, but then she makes no changes, you must leave. That means that you're with someone who is a bad fit. And women can feel this. They can feel if you have this internal belief. It's not something that necessarily has to be communicated. It's just in your vibe. It oozes from your pores that you will leave if she shows up in the way that causes you to leave. And one of the reasons why this is so important for creating spark is because when you look at the traits I listed out with spark, playfully teasing, having boundaries, being bold, being smooth, the willingness to escalate. When you look at some of those traits, engaging in them is essentially you taking a social risk. A lot of spark traits are behaviors that if you engage in, the woman could not like it. You make a move on the woman, she could not like it. You playfully tease her, she could not like it. You authentically express yourself, she could not like it. You stand 10 toes on a boundary, she may not like it. And if she doesn't like it, she could leave. And because you're protecting yourself from her leaving, you prevent yourself from ever creating spark. That's why I say it is a prerequisite to creating spark. You have to be willing to let her walk and understand that if she does walk because you're authentically expressing yourself, not in an uncalibrated way, I'm assuming you're calibrated, but if you are authentically expressing your energy and who you are as a person, and she decides to walk, that operates as a filtering mechanism. It essentially means she's not the right fit, which also means there is another woman out there who will be a right fit, and your goal now is to find her or to allow her to emerge within your life. This is the hardest thing for men to accept because a lot of guys have just fallen head over heels for the woman that they're currently with, or maybe they are men who don't really experience a lot of attention from the opposite sex. So once they do find a woman who's into them, they protect that like it's the golden goose. That's why this information is so important, because not understanding these skill sets creates that one-itis situation. It creates that scarcity mentality where you can't afford for her to leave because when's the next one going to come? That's why you got to take this seriously. That is if you want partnership. If you're one of those guys who just want to crack joints left and right, I don't think it's the right way to live, but this is your life. You do what you want. But this is for men who actually do want some sort of connection eventually. You do want to build a life with somebody. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have to be willing to leave. It's very paradoxical. Being willing to leave is actually the secret to making her want to stay. Now, the second thing that's going to help you create more spark in the connection is going to be you remaining grounded in your sense of self. Understand, there's two ways that guys tend to orient themselves in relationships. They either really become enmeshed with the woman and just try to be a one flesh, not in like the good biblical sense, but just like in the unhealthy sense, like you're merging into one. Or they do the complete opposite where they just constantly create distance and operate more like in an avoidant way. Both of those create different problems. You don't want to operate at extremes. You want to be right there in the middle. There's a book that I read called The Passionate Marriage where it talks about this concept of being differentiated. Being differentiated essentially means that when you're dealing with the woman you're with, you do two things that seemingly contradict. One, you remain grounded in your sense of self, your identity, and who you are. The second thing that you do is you remain connected with the woman. This can create a point of tension. This can be a very uncomfortable situation, but if you're able to pull this off, you're operating at an elite level. I have a hard time doing this, and I study this shit, right? But it's something I've been able to consciously access, being grounded in who you are and then connected to your woman simultaneously. That is the perfect blend of spark and safety. The spark element is you remaining grounded in who you are. The safety element is you remaining connected with your woman. If you're operating at that level, most men can't touch that. That's a lot harder to do than even making a lot of money or getting in shape because it's emotionally difficult. When things are emotionally difficult, that seems to be the biggest, highest degree of difficulty a human can experience is emotional difficulty. That's why so many people avoid it. But if you can pull it off, that whole high value man thing that people like to throw around, you 1000% become that. Because again, it is a skill set that's going to carry you in a lot of other domains in life. And it's a very important one to cultivate. So when you are able to keep a sense of who you are while dealing with the woman who may want to change you, who may be complaining about something, when you're able to keep that top of mind and also allow yourself to be affected by her, you are operating in a whole nother universe. Easier said than done, I know. Many guys struggle with it. I myself am not perfect with it, but like I said, I work with hundreds of guys and we're able to help them blend both spark and safety so that women or attracting women or even keeping women becomes a thing of the past. It's not something they actively have to worry about anymore because their default setting is one that is incredibly attractive and extremely rare. Most guys are not doing this. Most content online is either the hyper-therapeutic shit that's causing you to be a bit more enmeshed and talk about safety and creating safe spaces is a bunch of nonsense. And then the other side of the spectrum is more of the manosphere shit, which is essentially causing you to be more avoidant, like you're just creating emotional distance and thus attracting a whole bunch of anxious women. But if you want to increase the quality of the women that you attract, and then also increase the quality of the relationships you're able to be in, integrating some of these qualities are going to be your best bet. And if you need help with that, I have one-on-one coaching calls where we'll give you clarity on your situation so you know exactly what is happening and why it's happening. And more importantly, you'll get a step-by-step plan so that when you leave the call, you know exactly what next step to take so you don't spend the next 6 months like just spiraling and engaging in guesswork. All right. So if you want coaching, if you want to purchase your 1 hour coaching call so we can start working on this stuff so you can no longer be a safety guy and avoid the fate of a lot of other safety guys where they spend years in this category, if not decades or a lifetime, I have the link in the description for you to book your call, and I look forward to speaking with you.